adult thing when he suggests that America should withdraw our military support for Japan, encourage them to get nuclear weapons. And he said this about a war between Japan and North Korea, and I quote, "If they do, they do. Good luck. Enjoy yourself, folks." I wonder if he even realizes he's talking about nuclear war. Yes, our friends need to contribute their fair share. I made that point long before Donald Trump came onto the scene, and a number of them have increased their defense spending. The real debate here is whether we keep those alliances strong or cut them off. What he says would weaken our country. Third, we need to embrace all the tools of American power, especially diplomacy and development, to be on the front lines solving problems before they threaten us at home. Diplomacy is often the only way to avoid a conflict that could end up exacting a much greater cost. It takes patience, persistence, and an eye on the long game, but it's worth it. Take the nuclear agreement with Iran. When President Obama took office, Iran was racing toward a nuclear bomb. Some called for military action, but that could have ignited a broader war that could have mired our troops in another Middle Eastern conflict. President Obama chose a different path, and I got to work leading the effort to impose crippling sanctions. We brought Iran to the table, we began talks, and eventually we reached an agreement that should block every path for Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Now we must enforce that deal vigorously. And as I've said many times before, our approach must be distrust and verify. The world must understand that the United States will act decisively if necessary, including with military action to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. In particular, Israel's security is non-negotiable. They're our closest ally in the region, and we have a moral obligation to defend them. But there is no question that the world and the United States, we are safer now than we were before this agreement. And we accomplished it without firing a single shot, dropping a single bomb, or putting a single American soldier in harm's way. Now, Donald Trump says we shouldn't have done the deal. We should have walked away. But that would have meant no more global sanctions and Iran resuming their nuclear program and the world blaming us. So then what? War? Telling the world, good luck, you deal with Iran? Of course, Trump doesn't have answers to those questions. Donald Trump doesn't know the first thing about Iran or its nuclear program. Ask him. It'll become very clear very quickly. You know, there's no risk of people losing their lives if you blow up a golf course deal. But it doesn't work like that in world affairs. Just like being interviewed on the same episode of 60 Minutes as Putin was, is not the same thing as actually dealing with Putin. So the stakes in global statecraft are infinitely higher and more complex than in the world of luxury hotels. We all know the tools Donald Trump brings to the table: bragging, mocking, composing nasty tweets. I'm willing to bet he's writing a few right now. But those tools won't do the trick. Rather than solving global crises, he would create new ones. He has no sense of what it takes to deal with multiple countries with competing interests and reaching a solution that everyone can get behind. In fact, he is downright contemptuous of that work. And that means he's much more likely to end up leading us into conflict. Fourth, we need to be firm but wise with our rivals. Countries like Russia and China often work against us. Beijing dumps cheap steel in our markets. That hurts American workers. Moscow has taken aggressive military action in Ukraine, right on NATO's doorstep. Now, I've gone toe-to-toe with Russia and China and many other different leaders around the world. So I know we have to be able to both stand our ground when we must and find common ground when we can. That's how I could work with Russia to conclude the New START treaty to reduce nuclear stockpiles, and with China to increase pressure on North Korea. It's how our diplomats negotiated the landmark agreement on climate change, which Trump now wants to rip up. The key was never forgetting who we were dealing with. Not friends or allies, but countries that share some common interests with us amid many disagreements. Donald doesn't see the complexity. He wants to start a trade war with China. And I understand a lot of Americans have concerns about our trade agreements. I do too. But a trade war is something very different. We went down that road in the 1930s. It made the Great Depression longer and more painful. Combine that with his comments about defaulting on our debt, and it's not hard to see how a Trump presidency could lead to a global economic crisis. And I have to say, I don't understand Donald's bizarre fascination with dictators and strongmen who have no love for America. He praised China for the Tiananmen Square massacre. He said it showed strength. He said you've got to give Kim Jong-un credit for taking over North Korea, something he did by murdering everyone he saw as a threat, including his own uncle, which Donald described gleefully like he was recapping an action movie. And he said if he were grading Vladimir Putin as a leader, he'd give him an A. Now, I will leave it to the psychiatrist to explain his affection for tyrants. I just wonder how anyone could be so wrong about who America's real friends are. Because it matters. If you don't know exactly who you're dealing with, men like Putin will eat your lunch. Now, fifth, we need a real plan for confronting terrorists. As we saw 6 months ago in San Bernardino, the threat is real and urgent. Over the past year, I've laid out my plans for defeating ISIS. We need to take out their strongholds in Iraq and Syria by intensifying the air campaign and stepping up our support for Arab and Kurdish forces on the ground. We need to keep pursuing diplomacy to end Syria's civil war and close Iraq's sectarian divide, because those conflicts are keeping ISIS alive. We need to lash up with our allies and ensure our intelligence services are working hand in hand to dismantle the global network that supplies money, arms, propaganda, and fighters to the terrorists. And we need to win the battle in cyberspace. And of course, we need to strengthen our defenses here at home. Now that, in a nutshell, is my plan for defeating ISIS. What's Trump's? Well, he won't say. He's literally keeping it a secret. The secret, of course, is he has no idea what he'd do to stop ISIS. Just look at the few things he's said, and I quote, "Maybe Syria should be a free zone for ISIS." Oh, okay. Let a terrorist group have control of a major country in the Middle East. Then he said we should send tens of thousands of American ground troops to the Middle East to fight ISIS. He also refused to rule out nuclear weapons against ISIS, which would mean mass civilian casualties. It's clear he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about, so we But we can be certain that he's capable of doing any or all of them. Letting ISIS run wild, launching a nuclear attack, starting a ground war. These are all distinct possibilities with Donald Trump in charge. And through all his loose talk, there's one constant theme: demonizing Muslims and playing right into the hands of ISIS. His proposal to ban 1.5 billion Muslims from even coming to our country doesn't just violate the religious freedom our country was founded on. It's a huge propaganda victory for ISIS. And it alienates the very countries we need to help us win in this fight. A Trump presidency would embolden ISIS. We cannot take that risk. This isn't reality television. This is actual reality. And defeating global terrorist networks and protecting the homeland takes more than empty talk and a handful of slogans. It takes a real plan, real experience, and real leadership. Donald Trump lacks all three. And one more thing. A president has a sacred responsibility to send our troops into battle only if we absolutely must, and only with a clear and well thought out strategy. Our troops give their all. They deserve a commander-in-chief who knows that. I've worked side by side with generals and admirals and visited our troops in theaters of war. I've fought for better health care for National Guard, better services for our veterans, more support for our Gold Star families. We cannot put the lives of our young men and women in uniform in Donald Trump's hands. Now, sixth, we need to stay true to our values. Trump says over and over again, the world is laughing at us. He's been saying this for decades. He didn't just start this year. He bought full-page ads in newspapers across America back in 1987 when Ronald Reagan was president, saying that America lacked a backbone and the world was, you guessed it, laughing at us. He was wrong then, and he's wrong now. And you've got to wonder why somebody who fundamentally has so little confidence in America and has felt that way for at least 30 years wants to be our president. The truth is, there's not a country in the world that can rival us. It's not just that we have the greatest military or that our economy is larger, more durable, more entrepreneurial than any in the world. It's also that Americans work harder, dream bigger, and we never, ever stop trying to make our country and the world a better place. So it really matters that Donald Trump says things that go against our deepest held values. It matters when he says he'll order our military to murder the families of suspected terrorists. During the raid to kill bin Laden, when every second counted, our SEALs took the time to move the women and children in the compound to safety. Donald Trump may not get it, but that's what honor looks like. And you know what? It also matters when he makes fun of people with disabilities, calls women pigs, proposes banning an entire religion from our country, or plays coy with white supremacists. America stands up to countries that treat women like animals or people of different races, religions, or ethnicities as less human. What happens to the moral example we set for the world and for our own children if our president engages in bigotry? And by American Muslims or Mexican immigrants, remember that plenty of Muslims and immigrants serve and fight in our armed forces.